Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Hello, America. Happy Friday to all of you. Welcome to Furthermore with Amanda Head. I am loving that we are having this guest on today because there's so much to talk about in the political space. The Save America Act is a hot topic of conversation. Of course, the left is calling it Jim Crow 2.0, which is their favorite characterization of anything that they feel like is going to dilute their political power. And if you don't have illegals voting in elections, that is going to directly affect Democrats' power in Washington and in state houses across the country. So we are going to get into that with Nicholas Giordano today. He is a professor of political science, and he is the host of the P.A.S. Report. I'm sure all of you have heard all about the SAVE Act. This is something that Republicans have been trying to get passed for a long time, and it seems quite common sense. I think that when you look at Democrats who don't want to pass it. A lot of people saw this viral interview of Kamala Harris a week or two ago where she's utilizing another one of her word salads to try to explain why Democrats don't want voter ID without admitting that really the only reason is so that they can usher in illegal aliens to vote. But at any rate, we're going to break all of this down and what the Save America Act does. It was the Save Act. Now it's the Save America Act. And we are going to talk about that with my guest today, one of my favorite folks to talk politics with. He is Nicholas Giordano. He is a professor of political science and the host of his own podcast, the P.A.S. Report. Nicholas, great to see you.
Always a pleasure, Amanda.
All right. So, Democrats, it's really funny to watch them do the mental and verbal gymnastics required to come up with some reason why we shouldn't have voter ID. And of course, it always boils down to racism because accessibility. Talk to us about the Save America Act. First, let's start with what it does. It does put pretty strict requirements, which, by the way, there should be. Every other country does practically. Talk to us about it.
Well, I think what you just said is really important. Every other country does. Every single developed nation in the entire world, and most of the underdeveloped nations of the entire world, require ID to vote. So why shouldn't we do the same, especially given that the stakes are so high in our country, and we are a country that has an enormous amount of immigrants coming to the United States, both legal and illegal. So I think the SAVE Act is really important. It's about securing elections, and it's about election integrity. William Davey, a founding father, he actually warned that elections are the most tumultuous times in America. And if people don't trust the process, and if they don't trust the results, it could be the death of a constitutional republic. So it doesn't make sense that Democrats are fighting so hard against an issue that 83% of the American people believe in and they actually want to see. And I think that's important. You know, Democrats calling it Jim Crow 2.0 is completely ridiculous. So what does the SAVE Act actually do? Well, I think the first thing it does, it brings voter ID to the table. People will have to show their ID, and they will have to prove they're an American citizen so they could cast a ballot. I think that's common sense. Why would we want foreign nationals coming to this country and voting in our elections? Citizenship has to mean something. I know Democrats have tried over the years to devalue the concept of citizenship, but citizenship is what makes America. And without it, we are nothing but just a transient nation. We don't survive as a nation. So as far as voter ID goes, it's a really simple concept that you show an ID. And in most states, you also are going to have to show a birth certificate in order to prove your citizenship, or you could just show your passport, which automatically does. A lot of controversy is surrounding the idea of bringing a passport. But when you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get a license, you have to bring all these documents anyway. And just one of the problems that I have is the whole real ID system. And this is where you just see the machinery of government incompetence at work. In order to get a real ID, you either have to be a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident. To make the process simple, all we had to do was on a driver's license, a real ID driver's license was put citizenship, U.S., or legal resident in the United States. And then that's it. That's the only document you would need. Every DMV could actually upgrade their systems to do that. And there are many Republicans that said if Democrats go along with it, they'll actually pay for it. The federal government will pay for the DMV to upgrade the systems and send the licenses out to everyone. So I think that's important to hit on. But also it's about voter rolls. All voter rolls here in the United States are a mess. Yeah. You have people that have long been dead that are still on the voter rolls, people that have moved out of the jurisdiction, people that don't even exist in the first place, illegal immigrants on the voter roll system. And a lot of states don't take it upon themselves to clean these voter rolls. So the Save America Act actually requires states to remove non-citizens from the voter rolls and to maintain accurate records. And this is really important because Democrats say it's too hard. We can't do that. We'd have to build in new systems. What I find amazing, if someone passes away, within a couple of days, their Social Security payments are cut off. They ended. If someone goes to jail, their benefits are cut off. We could have the same system that alerts the Board of Elections whenever someone dies, whenever someone moves out of a jurisdiction, whenever they turn of age to vote. I think that's just common sense. I don't think the left is screaming about this, but why should anyone that's not eligible to vote remain on the voter rolls? And you have to, I think it's really important because the only reason you'd want that to happen is for fraud, right?
Of course.
Makes perfect sense. But they say, it's too complicated. But it's not. It's actually a really simple fix in computer systems. We have the technology today. The question is, do we have the will to do it? And then the third argument that you're hearing as pushback to the whole voter ID and the Save America Act is that it nationalizes our elections. That is a complete and utter lie. It doesn't nationalize anything. States are still responsible for ballot design. They're responsible for running elections. They're responsible for how to qualify to get on the ballot, voting procedures, locations, vote counting, certification. The states have all that power. The only thing the federal government is doing is saying in federal elections, you got to show that you are a United States citizen. This is simple common sense.
It is. It's total common sense. And going back to the statistic that you were talking about, 83% of U.S. adults feel, they have voted this way. They want voter ID, and you break it down by political party, and it's still a majority. 71% of Democrat or Democrat-leaning voters and 95% of Republican or Republican-leaning voters. And by the way, it's also a majority by race. 76% of Black Americans, 82% of Latinos, 85% of white Americans all think that voter ID should be established. But, going back to the technology upgrades that you were talking about, Nicholas, this is so simple. It is not like we are asking something insurmountable of the federal government, because I don't know how many of my audience, I don't know how many of you have flown in the last few years, but you might notice that when you go through TSA, they've slid in this little facial recognition thing. They didn't ask the Americans about it. They didn't ask the American people. We didn't vote on it or anything. They just slid in this little camera thing that when you show your passport or your ID, that it's a facial recognition camera. So if they can do that on a federal level, they can certainly upgrade the system.
They could, and it's so simple to do. I mean, listen, we talk a lot about how America is divided in this day and age and how this division is hurting us. Here's an issue where you have overwhelming agreement amongst Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarian, all races, all demographics. This should be a layup piece of legislation. It shouldn't be controversial. It shouldn't get stuck. It should just pass very easily with both Republican and Democratic voters. I mean, we elect these people to represent us in the system. Here's how you represent us. This should be a layup. But instead, what do you have? You have the Democrats fighting tooth and nail against it, with the exception of Senator John Fetterman, who I do believe said he would support an issue like this. And you have feckless Republicans that, for some reason, are scared to push this forward. Now, the pressure has been building on them. But again, when you have a mandate of 83% of the American people wanting something, it's a very simple thing. You get it done. You figure out a way to push it through. And yet you have some Republicans that are fighting tooth and nail, some that have already come out and announced they're not going to support it, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. But 48 Republicans have signed on as co-sponsors to the bill.
Yeah, thank God. I mean, Lisa Murkowski, don't even get me started on folks like her. And then even on the House side, Thomas Massie, it's insane. But I want to go back to something that you were talking about with regards to foreigners voting in our elections and how no developed country allows this. You know, I try to think of a scenario. I was trying to think of a scenario in my head where Democrats in this country wouldn't want foreigners voting in our elections. And in order to identify a country like that, we would have to find a country that Democrats oppose their way of life. But you can't really find anything like that because, you know, even though we as conservatives recognize the reality of China being our adversary, Joe Biden called them competition. He refused to label them as an enemy or an adversary or anything of the sort. You look at Muslim majority nations and Democrats obviously, have hitched their carriage to free Palestine. So you're not going to find them not wanting someone from that country to vote in our elections. Obviously, they want Hispanics voting in our elections. The only group that I could identify, Nicholas, as I was scanning this inventory in my head. Do you remember earlier last year when President Trump was allowing refugees in from South Africa, the Afrikaners, and they were all white, and Democrats were up in arms about it because they were white refugees? That's the group. I wonder if you went to Democrats and said, okay, do you want them voting in our elections? Maybe then we could finally pin them down on the reality that you can't have foreigners voting in a U.S. election.
You would think, but Democrats are known for projection and being hypocrites. And it's not to say Republicans aren't hypocritical at all, but this is an issue that's so clear. And what the founders warned about was those that push so much against election reforms to protect the integrity of an election, to shield the system. Well, they have sinister views of factions. Those are the words that they use, that the only reason you would be against things like this is that your political party is benefiting from a corrupt and rigged process. Now, imagine if we had voter ID, let's say in 2020, to all the Democrats out there, if we had these measures in place, well, then President Trump and Republicans wouldn't have had an argument that the election was corrupt and it was rigged. But because these measures weren't in place, it opened the door for those arguments. And why? Because we have no real way of knowing exactly who is voting in what states. Now, I have been on record for years saying that we should have done a nationwide audit in every single state, counting every single ballot that was cast. The reason that you do that is to make sure that the election is on the up and up. The problem that Democrats created is they loosened election rules so much, mail-in ballots for everyone, drop boxes, that we have no idea who's voting. You know, a mother with two kids that are, over the age of 18 that are registered to vote may never vote. But now the mother is so ideological, she may cast a ballot for them and have their kids sign it. Now, if they had to go to the voting booth and actually present an identification, or they had to go to the Board of Elections to pick up a ballot and present identification, well, maybe that changes things. We have to make sure that the people trust the results of an election, because the most important part of an election is not necessarily who won it. The winner isn't that important. It's who lost the election, the psychology of losing. The entire system depends on the person that lost. The millions of people who voted for that person is able to walk away saying, I don't like the result, but I trust the process. And I may try again, I may not, but I trust the process and it was fair. When you have that, you have peaceful transfers of power. When you don't have that, you collapse as a country.
Yeah. I mean, it's terrifying to think of what would happen if we allowed this to happen in perpetuity. And I think that we are already seeing, I see a lot of folks who voted for Trump getting blackpilled, because I think at the beginning when Trump took office last year and Doge was ramping up and we were really uncovering a lot of this corruption, I think a lot of people were hopeful that something could be done. But as you and I know from studying politics, I mean, the wheels of government turn very, very slowly, and they grind to a halt when you have one political party who is pushing up against it. And when it comes to corruption, and in this case, corruption in elections, it's very, very hard to get things to happen. So what do you anticipate the fate of the Save America Act is over on the Senate side? The last tally I saw, I mean, we were just talking about this, John Fetterman, I think is going to hop over on the side with Republicans. But when you have rhinos like Murkowski siding with Democrats, a lot, by the way, how do you get stuff done?
Well, first of all, I think it's going to all depend on Senator Thune and whether or not he's going to bring it to a vote. And if he tries to bring debate and vote, that means he's going to have to get rid of the zombie filibuster. There's no doubt about it. And part of the Republican problem, I don't think Republicans in office realize how much trouble they're in. And what I mean by that, for years, they've campaigned on fiscal responsibility, and they haven't delivered. They've campaigned on repeal and replace. They have nothing to replace the healthcare bill with. They campaigned on limited government, downsizing the government. Not made any progress there because government only grows and gets more powerful. They exposed all the abuses of power and the weaponization of government. And then they vote to reauthorize FISA without any real consequential reforms in it to protect everyone. So they campaign on one thing. They do another. They've campaigned on election integrity. If they can't get this across the finish line, I believe that there's a lot of Republicans that are just going to give up. They're going to say, you can't even get a bill through with 83% support. What's going on here? Now, it is complicated because of Senate rules, but we have to do away with the zombie filibuster. This is a rule that was put in place in 1970. It's not like it was part of the original Constitution. It's not like the talking filibuster that emerged in 1806, over 200 years old, and so we accept it. This was a creation in the 1970s. Get rid of it. Force the Democrats. If they want to delay, vote, force them on the floor, force them to talk, and then sooner or later, we're going to get a vote on it. Now, I think that if it does go to vote, I do believe it's got a 50-50 chance of passing. Because if it does go to vote, you nuke the zombie filibuster, well, then all you need is a 50-50 tie. J.D. Vance comes in and breaks the tie-breaking vote. But I think it could get over 51. I don't anticipate it getting to 60. There's no way it's going to get to 60.
No. All right, everybody, we've got to take a very quick break, but we'll be back on the other side. Welcome back, everybody. We are here with Nicholas Giordano diving into all things politics. We've got a lot of topics to cover, so we're going to dive straight back in. How else could Republicans benefit by breaking the filibuster? Because I feel like this conversation has been brought up pretty frequently over the last year. But I guess Thune is the one who is standing in the way.
Well, it's just a parliamentary rules change, and he has the power to change the rules that way. And I think that's what's important. Again, I am not someone that believes in nuking the filibuster. I like the filibuster. I think the filibuster forces compromise. I think the filibuster has served us well since 1806. But the zombie filibuster is nonsense. If you are willing to have this endless debate and delay the vote, then put your money where your mouth is, get on your feet, and talk for as long as you can. And if you can't do that, then so be it. Then the bill goes for a vote. And I think that why Thune is saying, well, it's a dangerous, slippery slope if we get rid of the zombie filibuster. Listen, Democrats have already said if they regain power, they're getting rid of the filibuster. They're going to impeach. They're going to target political opponents. So
absolutely,
get a step ahead. Getting rid of the zombie filibuster is not nuking the filibuster. It's getting rid of something that was just manipulated in 1970s.
Yeah. Okay. Who do you think would be better on the Senate side for majority leader than Thune? I mean, I can think of at least a half a dozen others who would be better, but who do you think would be the best Senate majority leader for getting President Trump's agenda done?
It's hard to tell because the Senate rules are archaic and they do get complicated. I personally like someone like a Ted Cruz, who is conservative. And let's be honest here, Cruz, when you look at his voting record, it's someone that has always and consistently votes the same way. He is someone that believes in the agenda. He's someone that is forceful and passionate. However, I doubt he'll ever become Senate Majority Leader. He has more of a chance of being on the Supreme Court than Majority Leader.
I like
Rick Scott. Yeah. I think Rick Scott is great. Rick Scott is someone that actually thinks outside the box. He is someone that challenges the status quo. He is someone that recognizes the problems of America and how they could be solved. So I also like him. I was actually rooting for him when they ran the last time to pick the Senate Majority Leader. But as far as Republicans go, too often what you have is these milquetoast Republicans in office. And what I mean by that is they're just happy with the status quo. As long as the gravy trains keep flowing, they're happy with the status quo. These Republicans believe that they are still working with 1990s Democrats like Tom Daschle and Dick Gephardt. They don't realize that Democratic Party doesn't exist anymore. That Democratic Party has died. It is now the Democratic Socialist of America Party. Yeah. And to look at what they're doing to Senator Fetterman, you have people actively trying to get Senator Fetterman booted out of the party because he dares to challenge the progressive wing of his party. You look at someone like a Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, who for most of his career has been pretty level-headed. I never liked him, but he's been a moderate, and yet now he just bows to the far left of the base, and he feels that he has to put up these fights that he knows are losing battles. So I think Republicans need to get their butts in gear. I don't anticipate Thune's going to be ousted from leadership. It's not the House of Representatives. It's not as chaotic as the House. I think Thune is going to remain a leader, but that's why every Republican and every independent and even every Democrat that believes in election security and integrity should contact Senator John Thune's office to put pressure on them. A lot of times what people will do is they'll put a post out and tag John Thune, or they'll go on this email campaign and blast emails. Understand, the politicians don't pay any attention to that. It's irrelevant to them. They don't even look at those emails most of the time. They don't pay attention to who's tagging them on Twitter. And it's mostly their staff that's looking at it, not even those senators. However, if you are getting the office inundated with phone calls, if you crash the switchboards of Congress, they pay attention. And I think that's what we need to start doing, is start getting engaged in our civic responsibilities. Instead of taking the easy way out and just sending an email, pick up the phone, talk to the people in his office, not just his office. Contact Senator Susan Collins' office. Contact all the other senators. And you don't have to be part of their state to call them. You can call. Doesn't matter. And if they get inundated with phone calls, they're going to feel that pressure, that political pressure. And I think that may actually lead to massive success.
I hope so. Okay, so I want to ask you before I let you go about midterms, because there's a lot of polling that indicates that the House at least is going to, I think the Senate is probably safe. I don't want to say that because I don't want to jinx it. But on the House side, things look iffy. However, you do have a lot of new seats in Texas thanks to the redistricting. And if the Save America Act can get passed, then I think that the Democrats, frankly, are going to lose a lot of votes just because illegals won't be able to get in there. But what's your sense about what could happen this November?
It really depends. So first of all, I think one of the most important things is getting the SAVE Act through. You have to give Republican voters something to vote for. And a lot of Republicans have become disillusioned and disengaged from the process. You don't win elections by saying, okay, Democrats are crazy, the Republicans are less crazy, so I'm going to support them. That's not a good way to win elections. Republicans think that they could scare people into voting for them because Democrats have gone off the rails. However, Republicans are tired of being disappointed, and they want to see some results. Compromise, we understand, is part of the system. No one ever expects perfection. You're not going to get your way 100% of the time. But if they can pass a bill supported by 83% of the American people because they're hiding behind the zombie filibuster, it's a pox on Republicans, and they are going to have a very difficult time in this election, right? Because we see the gaslighting by the left, and we see the cowardice on the right in leadership, and it only happens when we stay quiet. Now, if the SAVE Act does get passed, I do believe that is going to boost morale amongst Republicans. I do believe that is going to energize Republicans who aren't energized right now. And let's face it, the left is energized. They're going to the polls. They are going to go vote. Maybe not the illegal immigrants, but the left and the Democrats, They are going to turn out en masse in November. I also think a lot has to do with the economy. And I think that it always, in the elections, comes back to economics. Has my livelihood improved, or has it gotten worse under this administration and this Congress? And I think that if the situation improves economically and people's livelihoods, they're taking in more money, have more disposable income, which it looks like that's the case, then I think Republicans have a shot to win the midterms, even though historically the majority party usually loses. Yeah. So I think it does hinge on the elections. And we know this. Why? Because President Trump was elected to secure the border. He was elected to deport illegal immigrants. He was elected based on economics. Well, notice he secured the border. It's not a conversation, and people tend to forget quickly. And they're not going to sit there and reward it. So the economy and the snapshot in time from September to November is going to be the most critical. People are going to start really looking at the midterm elections over the summer towards the end of it. And that's when people are going to start making the decision of who they're going to support or if they're even going to go out and vote. Republicans have a very difficult task ahead of them to maintain the House. They have very small margins. They can do it, but they got to play the game right.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, Republicans deserve to have a hard time going into the midterms because, you know, as much as President Trump has done as much as he possibly can via executive fiat. But when it comes to getting things codified over, especially on the House side, I mean, frankly, they deserve it. And I don't think that they took the mandate that happened in November of 2024, winning the House, winning the Senate, winning the Oval Office and the popular vote. I don't think they took that mandate to heart as much as they should have. Or maybe it's just that they've all been in the swamp too long that it turned into a hot tub and they're way too comfortable to change the status quo. So anyway, Nicholas, it is always a pleasure having you here. Love being able to pick your brain. Tell everybody where they can find your podcast.
Everyone could go to PASreport.com or just check out your favorite podcast platform. You could either type in my name or the PAS Report, and it'll pop right up.
Yep. And everybody go check it out. You will learn so much from Nicholas. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
Thank you for listening to the PAS Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at PAS Report.